We're live.
Thank you. Welcome back to Senate Education on February 22nd. Ms. Kenny, thank you for your work over the weekend and on the holiday for what you sent out. I know I have seen it in an email, and I think you've probably sent it to Daphne as well.
That is a great question. I'm not sure I have. I know I sent it to Ms. St. James, but let me forward it right now.
Okay. Yeah, if you would. I don't know. I don't remember if, let's see.
I don't believe I've received it yet. If you want to forward it and I can share with the committee.
I just sent it to you. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yep, that's okay. I know I saw it over the weekend and I apologize. I did not notice that it was not sent to Daphne. So we'll just give everyone a minute for Daphne to send it along. It's brief.
We pulled 2 pages into 2 sentences.
Is Daphne emailing that or posting it?
She is going to email it.
Okay.
Ask her to email it.
It's just been emailed and I'll go ahead and post if you would like it posted as well.
Yes, please. So it is in our inboxes, and if everyone would take a second to take a look at the language. Sarah, would you just bring us through it?
Sure, yes. So we distilled the whole broader task force idea into some more succinct language that just says that Building Bright Futures shall use its existing committee structure to convene a task force to support the state agencies of human services and education in defining suspension, expulsion, and exclusionary practices in early childhood education settings and best practices for supporting children who face those measures. And it also says the task force shall review available data on exclusionary practices and make recommendations for legislative actions. So kind of trying to take all the big pieces we had talked about last week in terms of the task force's work and distill it into some very succinct language.
Questions or comments for Ms. Kenny? Senator Perschlick.
Thank you, Ms. Kenny. Would we leave the language in there that brought the expulsionary language to pre-K, or is this instead of that? It's like striking that language and having this, or keeping that and then just adding this?
We were considering this as an addition to that.
Okay. So there'll be a time in between where we won't have this guidance, but a school would not be allowed to.
Our hope is that Building Bright Futures already convenes many of these stakeholders. So our hope would be that the work could be completed pretty quickly. But I'm sure that that'll be a conversation on the House side as well when we may work to expand the language a little bit and add back in some specifically named stakeholders. At which point I'm sure there would be a conversation about timing of pieces. We don't want to oppose the prohibition on suspension and expulsion for young children, but there are definitely some pieces missing before that can be implemented. So.
Right, now I wonder, because in general, when I talk to the early education centers, they're feeling overwhelmed with government regulation. And then even though like you guys, we don't want to oppose it, but here's another thing they got to deal with. And I'm afraid as we keep adding things on, it just causes more of them to close, or like the one I've been talking to, they just say, well, we just stopped taking the state money. So then we don't have to, we can do whatever we want. But that's making it not then therefore less affordable for
Right.
those.
That's
that need
certainly a
it.
concern. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, which is why it's so important that I think a very clear definition of what we're talking about and how programs need what they need to report to the agency and how best to support, most importantly, how best to support kids to thrive in their programs and what resources they need to be able to do that is really the key to making this work.
Thank you.
Senator Chittenden.
So it seems like great language. I guess I'm just a new person question. Why do we need it? It seems like you could do that without it being in statute or in.
Our goal, the Let's Grow Kids and the Vermont Family Network's goal here is to make sure that the agencies that are responsible for defining this and getting the word out to programs, that they are working together with stakeholders to, and specifically with early childhood education specialists, to think about the real world implications of how this plays out in early childhood education settings. So it's, the goal here is to have the legislative stamp on, yes, this should move forward, and you should talk to all the stakeholders to figure out how best to implement this and what best practices should look like. And additionally, to sort of solicit recommendations from this group back to the legislature to figure out if there are additional resources that are needed to be able to support kids to thrive in early childhood education settings, to set the stage for those recommendations to come back to you.
Thank you.
And if I may, Ms. Kinney, before asking Senator Lyons to jump in, we are anticipating that when hopefully this will get to the House, and that we will see even more language after the House works on this, per our conversation last time. Senator Lyons.
You know, I think that Senator Chittenden's question is one that we hear frequently about, you know, if they're going to do it anyway, why do we have to step into the middle of it? I hear that in my committee all the time. But if we want to have some uniformity, consistency across different places and break down the silos that we currently have, it makes a whole lot of sense to bring people together and have this discussion. I remember the bullying conversation and how the diversity of opinion across different educational institutions, and just bringing the conversation in and bringing people together allowed for, you know, best practice to be understood. And it gives people time to focus on something in a way that they might not if we just say, oh yeah, we'll do it. We know how that goes. I think everyone is sincere, but if you give them a specific task and then there's time to get it done and bring it back with recommendations, makes a whole lot of sense. That's all.
That's great.
Thank you for your language.
Thank you. Thank you for the extra time to distill it down. As my
No.
coworker just said this morning, I don't know who said it, but I would write you a shorter letter, but I don't have the time.
Yes,
Right. No, it's true.
that was
Lot harder
Mark
to
Twain.
craft. Yeah,
Was it Mark Twain?
Yeah.
Harder to craft, a lot fewer words.
Well, I too just want to thank you for your work, especially on a holiday weekend. We not seeing any objections. We will ask Ms. St. James to include it, and we'll look at a new draft, I believe tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Great. Thanks very much. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
Mr. Demaray. You had, while we're waiting for Jim, up there he is, just a quick update. I did send Jim some language on PCBs. One of the things that was brought to my attention is that we do have, we passed language last year saying that the legislature would come up with, I'm not sure if it was a plan or a path forward or something regarding PCB testing. And so, Jim, I see you have passed that on to those that were involved with that drafting, which was Mike O'Grady, and I'm not sure who else. Sorry, you're not.
Sorry about that. Becky Wasserman.
Becky Wasserman's great. So hopefully we'll hear from them soon. But now a topic that you're quite familiar with, S219.
Yes. Okay, so for the record, Jim Damery, Let's Council, we are looking at draft 5.3 of S219. There's really just one major change here, and it is on page 18. And it's the point that was raised at your last discussion on this topic about exceptions to be able to use public tuition to send students to states or countries that don't border Vermont or are not in Quebec. And so it says now in line 6 that an independent school in another state or country that is approved under the laws of that state or country is eligible to receive public tuition if all of the following conditions are met. 1, it's located in a state that borders Vermont or Quebec. Provided that an independent school that is not located in a state that borders Vermont or in the province of Quebec shall be eligible to receive public tuition if A, the student is on an IEP and is placed at the school in accordance with the IDEA laws, the federal laws. B, the student is on a Section 504 plan. C, the student is disabled, as that is defined under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And D, the student is not on an IEP or 504 plan, and is not disabled, but the school board of the resident student determines that the student has unique educational needs that cannot be adequately served by schools located in Vermont. I sent you the definition in the Americans with Disability Act of disability, which I found to be quite vague and hard to get my arms around. But the other thing about that is if you are on an IEP or a 504 plan, there's a process that determines whether you're on IEP or 504 plan under federal law, involving teachers and parents, and there's a whole evaluation. But for disability, the way this is drafted now could have a parent claim the child's on disability without verification. So a different approach, which I thought of after drafting this, is instead to refer to disability as defined by the State Board of Education. There are like 12 categories of disability, and that determination is made by, it's part of the process for being on IEP. You have to first be determined to have a disability by your school. So, and that's a check. That's a kind of independent check to make sure that the child is disabled. So you could switch this out and use the state board definition and apply the exception to students who have been identified as having a disability using that process. And that's really, I think, the only change there was. I'm checking quickly to see if there's any more edits. I don't think so, though.
So do we, so you're saying that a family could simply say, that their child has a disability without any kind of confirmation, and then use tuition dollars
To go to, go to Switzerland or something, right? Or to California. So my only point there is that you have a check on the first two categories, IEP and 504, but you don't have a check on the third
It's
one.
it's a pretty, I don't get, incredibly dishonest thing that you're saying somebody might do. I'm not saying, say that the child has a disability, then send them to a school where they're not being, where that disability isn't being treated, just simply lying in order to get those funds to go to another independent school. And right now, and there wouldn't be any check for that. And you're proposing that there be a check through the state board.
Well, there already is a check done in schools, because in order to get on a 504 plan or
Yeah.
or IEP, you have to have a disability. So that is, and if you don't meet the other thresholds, then you won't be on 504 or IEP, but you would have been identified by the school as having a disability as defined by state board rules. So there's already a process in place.
Mhm.
So it's not, I don't think it's, I guess AOE should testify as whether this is adding anything, but it seems to me it fits right into their
no.
current program.
Senator Lyons.
Yeah, I was going to ask for clarification of that. I'm just looking at it and I'm wondering, I mean, it needs to be there, but there needs to be validation. So is there a way to just simply say validated through AOE or something like that? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are specific rules on point here in
Mm.
the special education rules, and the determination of disability is done by the evaluation planning team, which is a number of people involved on that team. So there's a process in place already, as I mentioned, to do this. So I think it could be switched out from a reference to federal law to a reference to state board rules and the process they have in place currently.
Then my other question relates to the D. And what process is there to determine that there isn't a school in the state of Vermont that can support the student? And you know, this is a pretty wide open. Is this where the student going to Switzerland issue and concern comes from? That just,
But D is in current law for
I know,
operating districts, right? So
yeah,
so that is a process that's already in place for operating districts, and this is
there is a process. That was my question. There is a process?
this language in D that you mentioned.
Yeah,
Is the same language essentially as in place if you are a student in an operating district, but you want to use public tuition to go to a school, independent school, different school, independent school, you can appeal to your school board, and they make this determination based upon,
yeah.
whether the school can't serve that child's needs, and therefore
But, okay, go ahead.
but I think you're raising a different point actually, which is this test here is that their needs can't be adequately served in schools located in Vermont.
Any school in
And-
Vermont, that's a
and that-
question.
That's a good question because
Yeah,
the school board have to know what schools in Vermont can offer. So that could be a consultation with AOE maybe, or something for.
Jim, would you be
It-
willing to
it-
reach out to Emily Simmons about this?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Might be
Yeah.
the first step. Senator Lyons?
yeah, no, I just, the issue for me is how that determination is made, looking across the whole landscape. So, because I know we have a diversity of schools in the state and they focus on different opportunities. So that'd be helpful to know what
Definitely.
process exists.
Definitely.
Well-
If you would reach out to Ms. Simmons, that would be great, Jim,
Yep.
and come back to us either. I don't think it's possible later today, but sometime tomorrow.
I think I confused the issue just then because I was saying that this is already in place for operating districts. It's a little bit different actually, because that test is that the public school you're going to can't offer what you need. Therefore, they allow tuition to go outside of that public school. But this test is more specific because you have to determine also that schools in Vermont don't offer the services. So what I said earlier is not quite correct.
Senator
So
Hooker.
I will raise that with Emily.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that sort of speaks to the question I had about, what are these needs? And does this mean that every individual's needs have to be vetted, so to speak, and that every school has to be assessed to see if they need, if they meet those needs? So, and is that what happens now?
No, does not happen now. This would be a new process because you're adding the element about schools in Vermont not offering these services. That's
Okay,
a new
in
thing.
Vermont, in Vermont is
Yeah, in
the,
Vermont.
yeah, operable word. Okay, okay. But currently, it does happen for schools in Vermont.
It does happen for operating districts. If the public school can't serve the child's needs, the parents can appeal to the school board and ask to use public tuition to go to an independent school. But that's not limited to in Vermont. That could be anywhere, right? And there's no analysis of, whether those services could be found in Vermont. So this Vermont thing is a new element to the test. And
I don't think it's a bad element. I guess the question is when currently when the family goes to the school board and makes a request, does the family take, so look at this district doesn't offer the curriculum that my son absolutely needs. Do they take the school that they've identified in Western California? Do they take that school in for approval at that point, or who does that research? So it'll be an interesting question how that research is accomplished.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how the process actually works,
Either.
but I don't think that under current law, the school board does not have to make a determination as to where the child goes to school. It's just that the program offered by the public school isn't sufficient, right? And the parents, then if they say yes, then the parents have choice. They can go.
I think what happens sometimes is that parents will put out the tuition and then they will go back to the school for reimbursement. I think a lot of the times, from what I've heard, is it's a crisis situation. These aren't, a student is a family needs to work on something with their child. They enroll the child. Maybe there's an arrangement with the school itself, and then it goes back to the school board for reimbursement. Is one of the processes that I know happens. So sometimes I don't think it's all as quite as lined up as we would all think of in terms of an admission process. I think we're dealing sometimes with some very severe situations where parents act and maybe cover part of the tuition or et cetera, and then go back for and try, and maybe they're not always successful, but they try to bring the issue to a school board.
Your bill has changed that to mention, because your bill requires payment directly from the state or the school district to the school.
I'm just talking about right now under current practice, though, or even going forward. Correct me if I'm wrong. If a parent were to pay $10,000 to a school to hold a spot, and the school board were to then pay that tuition, it doesn't preclude the school from issuing the money back to the parents.
Your bill does, because your bill requires.
Oh, it does. So so the school in California cannot send reimburse the family.
The school can, but the state.
That's exactly what I just said, though.
Okay.
So I'm saying if the parents give the school $10,000, hold my son's spot. Here's the first quarter of tuition. And then they go back to the school board, and the school board says, okay, yes, we agree to pay the tuition. They pay the tuition. Then the school itself can reimburse the family the $10,000.
Oh, the school can, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is happening a lot out there, is that in some of these crisis situations, parents are getting the spot as quickly as they can. And sometimes it means them, they need to put that money up first. Questions for Jim on this or anything else related to the bill? Any additional concerns about the bill besides sort of settling this at this point? Okay, then we'll come back to Jim. If you would reach out to Emily, that would be great.
Yep.
And maybe if you can do it this evening, great. I'll be available throughout the evening. If you want to send me some language, we can sort of play with that.
Yep, I'll draft it now and get it to you and Emily. Yep.
Great. Okay, thanks very much.
Yep.
Okay, Daphne, I think you can take